Our guest this week is Ethan Austin, founder and general partner of Outside VC. Outside's a Boulder-based firm with a focus on pre-seed startups, outsider founders, and financial inclusion. We talked about why Ethan's a founder-first investor, fintech, what it was like running Techstars Boulder during COVID, and life as a solo GP. Please enjoy. Ethan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe we get started, dive right in. What's something that excites you in a deal? You hear it and you think, okay, it's time for me to start reverse pitching this founder.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to make this too simple or reduce it to one thing, but for me, it's usually their origin story. Everything has to kind of line up. Let's say you have to like the company. You have to like what they do. You can't not like it. You have to believe in what they're doing. For me, it has to be like the price has to be right. Like price is wrong. It's just like, doesn't matter how much I like it. I get it more excited if the price is the right price. And all those things have to be in play. You have to think the space is growing and you have to think like those things are there. But like the thing that like really gets me at least to buy is just hearing that founder's origin story and like why they're doing this, because these things are so freaking hard. Like we're so bad at guessing what's going to work that the people that have like crazy amount of grit and just going to fight this thing through and are doing things in an unusual way or thinking about things differently and how they came about that, starting with like the beginning of their life. You start asking people about their origin story and then maybe they'll start talking about their career track. And maybe if you're lucky by the second or third time you talk to them, you dig in a little deeper and you get further earlier into their life. And this guy started off just telling me about his life from the jump. He was like talking about the trauma he went through and all the stuff that he went through and the fact that where he's at today, and he just felt destined to build something big. And so like by the time I had talked to him on the phone, I've only done this twice. I made the call after the call, or I made the call on the call. I was like, well, let's do this. It was literally like, it wasn't our biggest check, but it was a single call. And I was like, I'm in. This guy is going to do something great. I don't know if it's this or the next thing, but he's going to do something great. And it was really just getting to hear that person's story.
What is an outsider founder?
Outsider founder. So outsider, there's something great about outsiders is that I don't define it. I let people define it for themselves. And the reality is like most people at some point in their lives have felt like an outsider. And you talk to people that you think look like an insider and they're like, oh no, like, everyone's felt this sense of rejection. So it could mean a couple different things for people. It could mean, your identity, right? Like how you grew up, where you grew up. Like a lot of people coming from this country, from other places in the world, and like, their immigrant story, right? For instance, is like we have a lot of immigrant founders, have felt like outsiders coming to a new country. That's an easy one. But it's also, when you think of people with non-traditional work paths, career paths, or non-traditional backgrounds, like Steve Jobs was an adopted hippie. He went to some random, not like Harvard or Stanford. He went to school in the Pacific Northwest and like he was an original thinker. And so I think a lot of outsiders don't follow the norms that everyone else is following. They're just thinking differently. And whether that's because you had a different background growing up, something has shaped the way you think and you're just not a conventional thinker. I think that's ultimately what matters, is like the way you think. And oftentimes it's shaped by your life experiences.
You mentioned on the Outside VC site that you like to think of yourself as a friend and an investor. How do you handle situations where a founder is way off base, off track, and they need some tough love?
Yeah, I think that's part of being a friend, right? So your friends are the ones that tell you you've got broccoli in your teeth. Like everyone else just says, oh, doesn't tell you the hard stuff. I think being a friend is precisely actually just telling them when their stuff's not working. So the way I do it is the same way like when I was a founder. And I don't think I knew how, as an outsider founder, I'd never actually worked before I became a founder. I had no actual experience with anything. So I just managed the way I thought you would manage. And that was be kind to people most of the time and build trust with people and be a cheerleader for people. I always won the best cheerleader award at my work. And if you're a cheerleader for people most of the time, then they know you have their back. And so when you have to tell them that their stuff's not working, then they trust you because they already know that you have their best like intentions. That's what I do. And, just build trust up with people early. And so when something happens, because it always does, when you're like, yo, dude, this is not cool, or this is not working, or you need to kind of think through this, people actually hear you.
What's typical ownership percentage for you guys?
Typical ownership percentage, I was trying to go for, 2 to 8% in first fund. I'm just looking through the numbers now and putting, fundraising, putting together stuff for fund two. Where we ended up was 2.2%. So at the very, very bottom end of that range. I think I miscalculated how expensive pre-seed rounds are, like in where everything else crashed, and late stage investing valuations crashed post 2022. The pre-seed valuations and seed valuations seem to stay pretty lofty. It was all the capital that was kind of on the sidelines kind of moved into pre-seed. So I got that wrong. We'd like to own for fund two. We're trying to own 5 to 8%. We'll be writing a little bit bigger checks and just have a little bit more ownership in the companies.
We're around 2% at Seaplane. Yeah, and I'd say it's an interesting threshold because it's enough to get you a seat at the table, but it's small enough where, to get back to the friend/investor piece, like you're not throwing your weight around. You're there to help. And I guess I frame it to investors like, I don't frame it as a friend. I'm like, look, think of me as like a member of the pit crew or, your favorite uncle. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm here to help. I want to see you succeed. I've got a vested interest in it. But that's how to think of it.
I think I agree. It's like, I'm here to be helpful. A lot of founders will say like, hey, you've been the most helpful person on our cap table. And I think that's not like, it's definitely not saying you're the smartest person on our cap table or you're the most strategic. It's basically saying you're one of the few people that are willing to roll up your sleeves on our cap table, even though we have these other big brand name firms behind us. And I think that's a good place to be. I think it's like, if you can be like the go-to, either the first call or the second call, like you're probably going to call your lead investor first, but if you can be the second call for folks, and oftentimes we are the first call because they'll ask us, how should I think about this before talking to my lead investor, right? They just know you're on their team. It's a good kind of place to be, I think, for founders to have someone they can ask the stupid questions to and not feel like any judgment from.
It's a bit of a cliche that VCs talk a big game about support and then fade after the wire is done and the paperwork's done. For you, how do you stay engaged with your founders in a way that's helpful and productive, but you're not trying to make them feel like you're backseat driving either?
I'm very responsive. I'll make introductions when I see something proactively. I'll just like, yo, you should talk to this person. I think that would be great. I'll do that. I never try and push them in a direction for their company. Like that just feels foolish to me. There'll be times when, I'll get financials from them and I'll be like, you guys should be really thinking about, this runway. Let's maybe have a chat about that when it feels like we're about to get into the danger zone and they're not seeing it maybe, but rarely do it. I mean, like I'm never going to tell someone their product or strategy roadmap. Like that just seems silly. The way I stay engaged is, and I encourage everyone, like I write a monthly update and I've been consistent for 36 of those in a row. And it engages my community. And I encourage all of them to write the monthly updates, and like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like VCs are also busy. I've got 28 portfolio companies. I'm really only responding if you ask for something. And so like I try and encourage them to be squeaky wheels and like ask as much as possible from your community. And then if they ask, then I roll up my sleeves and I dig in for them, whether that's a hire or whether that's investor intros or whether that's help me think through this thing. I usually try to respond to every single thing I can help with. I'll respond to. And if I can, I'll let them know, I don't have any contacts here or I have no knowledge of this topic.
What has you passionate about financial inclusion?
Financial inclusion. So I fell into fintech. I weaseled my way into letting Techstars and Western Union let me run this fintech program. And I convinced them that I had the right background to do it. I really didn't, but I convinced them that I did. The first year I ran the program as fintech, like pure fintech. And honestly, it was it was kind of boring for me. I love the founders, but the topic of fintech is just kind of boring. It feels like, moving 25 bips here, moving 25 bips there. You're helping rich people get a little bit richer. It just didn't feel like it was moving the needle for me personally. Financial inclusion, I've spent my entire career in impact in helping people as a founder before I became an investor. And like that feels like a driving force for me. My mantra is have fun, do good, help others. And if you can't help others, in a meaningful way, it wouldn't be a category I stayed in. So the year two, I switched it and I said, I want to make this more me. And I moved the program and created a thesis around access. And the problem with the financial system, just like all systems, is like it really favors a small minority of people. And if you're wealthy, you have great tools. And if you're not, it's really expensive to be poor. You get taxed like by having crappy tools. You get charged more. You don't have access to things. And it's really hard to get out of that hole. And so I saw fintech or financial inclusion is really like, how do you make the financial system work better for everyone? And how do you like reduce income inequality, wealth inequality, these gaps that are persistent across the globe? And obviously you can't solve that alone with fintech. It takes policy, it takes all sorts of things. But like I think it's a small first step in helping more people reach the middle class. And I think that's an important thing that gets me excited. Is just like, how do you impact as many people as possible? And fintech is probably one of the biggest ways. Still, in most countries, a bank building is still the tallest building in the country. And so banks and financial services are like a fifth of global economy. They're making tons of money for people. And so it's an area where you can both make a ton of money, right? Like for yourself and for your LPs, and have a massive impact on people's lives. And so it's an exciting, I think, place to play.
I love the line about the bank building being the tallest in a lot of cities. That's great.
Yeah.
I was looking at fintech data before and saw that from like peak during the boom to trough, let's call it a year ago, it was roughly like a 90% drop in funding into fintech. Now, a lot of that might have been crypto that might have been lumped in there. And so, maybe fintech was a little too broadly defined. But what are you seeing today in fintech from an opportunity set perspective?
One of the things I think that's really exciting that we haven't seen for a long time, our last investment is in a consumer fintech company. And consumer as a whole, I'm a consumer founder. That's what I built a company in consumer in 2008 to 2016. Really, there hasn't been a ton of consumer wins in general in venture in the last decade. Right? The last big wins in consumer might be like DoorDash and like Uber. But those were all like 10, 15 years ago. And then the last decade has just been B2B. And like most of my portfolio is enterprise and B2B. And that's because it's impossible to have gotten downstream funding, for any consumer stuff for the last decade. And now with the advent of AI and like where things are going with a lot of agentic AI, like the opportunity to do consumer is going to arise again, right? Consumer, the biggest companies from 20 years ago were all consumer. Like all the huge companies, all the big wins were all consumer. And that window, that tech window, James Currier wrote a great post about this from NFX. That tech window for consumer is opening back up again, and I'm excited about that because I get jazzed by consumer. I think it's fun. Like when you're a consumer, when you're a mission-oriented startup, and you start growing, 300%, 400%, 500% a year. There's nothing more addicting than like knowing you're helping a lot of people and you're growing, and it's just like this fun space to be. And there's no other feeling like it. And so getting to participate in consumer again is something I'm excited about. I think it'll still be a smaller portion of our portfolio, but like our first bet from our fund two that we've already put into into a consumer company that's doing consumer credit. It's a person who built basically Credit Karma for Asia and took it public and spent 15 years doing that. It's like no Gen Zs are using Credit Karma. Trust me. That's not how they're doing things. And so he's building what he's built kind of in the past, but for the next generation using AI. And now like there's just an opportunity to build lots of things with agents that wouldn't have existed, in the past, and that opportunity exists. So I'm excited about that.
You were running Techstars Boulder through COVID and left around the time where the market started to get really toppy. But what was that experience like, running a program that felt like it should have been really hands-on through such a tough time?
Yeah, it was hard. I didn't like it as much, honestly. Being remote, like part of Techstars. So I went through Techstars. I went through the very first class of Techstars Chicago. I have probably 5 or 6 LPs from that were classmates of mine. Right. Actually, the last deal that company I just told you about, he's an LP, and he's the one that introduced me to that company. And so like the camaraderie of an accelerator, whether it's Techstars or YC or Pair or Better Tomorrow Ventures or any of them, there's 3,000 of them, right? Is this amazing thing that's the best part of it. Right? Everyone talks about the funding and the mentorship. The best part is like the peers, and like you're going through the muck together, and you stay bonded for life. If you lean into it, these are your homies forever. And I loved the fact that it's I called it part investing and part summer camp, and getting to be the camp director was just such a joy. And one of my KPIs is how many weddings do I get invited to, and so far I'm still at 2, hoping to get to more. But like, you get to build a relationship with people, oftentimes as a first investor, and just like co-working with them for 3 months is fun. When you get to do it virtual in 2020, which is what happened, like you can almost probably get better companies, because you're not limited to people who can fly to Denver for 3 months, right? If people with families, like that's really hard to travel if you have little kids or kids at all. They don't apply. But when those restrictions came off, you got really top-notch founders, because it opened the door. It made it more inclusive. It just give people more access. It wasn't as much fun though, not as much fun. And so that was a big part of why I decided to leave, the uncertainty of where things were going to go. I think you just got to do stuff that you find to be the most fun, and it wasn't as fun as the in-person stuff.
On that note, you've been startup founder, you started your own venture firm. How would you say the experiences were similar, but also different?
You were as much an entrepreneur as anyone else. Like, investing, like the thing that people think, like being an investor is very much different than starting a small venture firm. Like I'm probably closer to a small business owner than I am anything else, right? You wear 17 hats. Investing is probably stuff you do 25% of the time. 75% of the time, you're doing other stuff. You're fundraising, you're marketing, you're doing fun admin stuff. Like you're doing investor relations. You're doing so much stuff. Investing is just a part of it. So in a sense, it's very much like you are the scrappiest of scrappy startup founders. My budget for the year is way smaller than when I was running a startup, like infinitely smaller. Like I do this, I sleep on couches still, just like I did when I was a startup founder, 15 years ago, right? You fly to places, and like I sleep on the couches of my LPs when I go travel. So there's a lot that's very similar. What's different, which is good and bad, which was a part of the reason I decided to do this from a personal standpoint, was like at a startup, like the best thing about a startups, in my opinion, right, is the team. The same reason I love Techstars, like being the camp director. When you get to build out a team, like I still have text messages all the time with my former employees from 15 years ago. Like, and a bunch of them are LPs in my fund now too. Like you just stay homies with these people, and like the inside jokes and the practical jokes and the office stuff. And like, it was just such a tight, you don't want to say family, it was such a tight knit like team of people. And like you're having the most fun ever. Like it was so fun to be there. I remember we had an intern that worked for us for a year and a half for free because we had no money. And I was just like, what? I asked her one time, like, why did you work for us for a year and a half for free? It's supposed to be a 3-month internship. She just said, like, I'm having more fun here than I have anywhere else. And so like the thing that's different running a fund or a firm, especially like as a solo GP, is like, it's a lot lonelier, right? You're not celebrating the wins in the same way with your teammates. You're celebrating them with your portfolio founders, you're celebrating with your LPs. you got your dog or your wife or your spouse or your kids, like we'll celebrate with you, but like it's not that same level of camaraderie that you have as a startup founder. And so I say it's a much different path from that front.
When potential firm founders hit you up for advice and they ask you about, should I start a firm? What should I be thinking about? What's your advice for them?
I'd say do it. I mean, like I'm so addicted to this. I love it. So like do it if you know you love it. Like I got advice from one of my lead investors, this guy Eric Paley, who was a mentor to me, and he told me if you do this, it's probably the last thing you're going to do. So do it for the right reasons and be ready to do it. And I waited 6 years, essentially, before jumping in and deciding to start it, because I wanted to make sure that this was the thing I loved doing, because it's not an easy way to make money, right?
There are much easier ways to get paid.
Basically, every way is easier than starting out in like your tiny little venture firm. Like you're probably going to be burning cash in the beginning, and it's financially stressful. And so like do it, but do it because you can't not do it. Do it because you love it. I can give tons of like tactical, advice, but I think that's like the fundamental choice of like whether you do it. Like don't do it because it seems sexy or cool. I'm basically a professional emailer. What do you do? Like if kids ask me what I do, I'm like, whoa, I send a lot of email.
Calendly like, Wrangler.
Yeah, it's like it's not glamorous. Occasionally I get to do some podcast like this and say some things that make me feel like I know what I'm talking about. But like that's once a year, twice a year, 5 times a year. The rest of the time I'm just basically grinding away emailing people. And so, do it if you really love it, if you really love like helping founders, if you really like the thrill of the hunt of finding a great deal, great company. But it's definitely not like glamorous.
What do you feel about the state of pre-seed today? You mentioned earlier valuations didn't come down as much as you would have expected. How do you think about that going forward?
I think they are what they are, and it was a miscalculation on my end from Fund One, just like being able to find deals in companies and investments, $3 million, $4 million range. It's just not a thing as it used to be. I don't know. I think the companies coming out right now are good. I think the last few years were hard times, and it filters out the people that that shouldn't be there, right? The people that are there for the money or are there for the what they think is glamour, and I think it leaves a lot of founders who are there because they have to do this, and I think that's a good place to be if you're an investor. I think there's an infinite pool of really talented people out there starting things right now. I think it's an exciting time to be an investor. So I mean, I think as a former founder and I think I'm very predisposed to be optimistic around things. So I try to see the best in the situations, but I do think it's a fun time to be an investor right now.
You probably talked to a lot of first-time founders, probably more first-time founders than someone who comes in at seed, particularly Series A. What are mistakes that you see pre-seed founders stumble into when they're pitching VCs?
That's a great question. There's a lot of things. One, I think they focus on the wrong thing. Like second-time founders will focus on optimizing for getting the round done. They'll either optimize for one of two things: one, speed, or two, the best investors possible. Right? Those are the two things second-time founders optimize for. First-time founders often optimize for valuation, and they'll look at Carta data and they'll be like, "Well, it seems like the average valuation is X," and you're like, "I don't know where Carta gets this data from." I love Peter. I think the data is probably accurate for a lot of things, but like the valuations on Carta seem pretty high, and so they say, "Hey, well, this is the benchmark," and I'm like, "Dude, you're not going to get that. I can just tell you right now, you're not going to get that. You're going to spend 8 months trying to fundraise. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to kill your business. Like, you're not going to get that." And then like inevitably, like they wasted all this time when like they should have set the valuation at a more reasonable place, and they would have been done with their fundraise. And like I think at the early stage, a lot of founders don't get the VC math, right? Of like how ownership, what the ownership needs to look like, how the fund model works, the power law dynamics of it. Like in order to return the fund, they don't know that math, nor should they. But if they did, they'd probably price their startups at like a place that would get the deal done quickly, because early stage investors are pretty sensitive around valuation, because we know we're going to get so diluted down. Like you have to, and you're oftentimes not putting a second check in. You have to have a sizable enough ownership stake that if any one of these hits, it can return the fund. And if you own 0.5%, you need a lot of companies to win to return the fund.
I was talking to a founder yesterday who has some good early traction, interesting product, market seems ripe. And he was of the view that he ought to wait a year before raising more money on the basis that he could command a higher valuation. And I'm sure he would, but this is self-serving. But my feedback was, well, you've got a competitor who's nipping at your heels. This is a kind of industry where customers buy because of proof points from other customers. So would you rather you and your co-founders own 50% 10 years from now of a huge business, or 60% of a small business? And if waiting a year may be the difference on those outcomes. And again, self-serving, but some feedback for founders who may be trying to get a little too cute with pricing.
I think it's pretty common for first-time founders. Like it's like, this is your baby. Of course, I don't want to give up more than I need to, right? Like that's just natural. I think other things that are like really important though too, that most people don't get. Like most people spend so much time focusing on the deck and the narrative, and like I think the deck and your narrative matter. I think your traction obviously matters. Like how well is the company actually doing? VCs are obviously going to look at who you are, what you've done in the past, or like why you. But what I think most people don't get, and what I think actually gets deals done, is people who run a good process. That's the most overlooked thing, that most founders don't run a good process. And you see the ones that do, and they're just like, oh man, this is a great process. And they stack the odds in their favor instead of the VC's favor. That's how you get the deals done. Like VCs are not that smart. Like we follow the herd. We care about FOMO. We get tricked, even though like by momentum.
Even though we know what's happening.
Even though we know what's happening. Are you tricking me? Yeah, I'm tricking you. All right. It's just like we get tricked. And so like the founders that had set up good processes for their fundraise, they fundraise better. And it's like, I respect a good process, because I'm like, if they run a good process, like how do they run the rest of their company? I bet they run it pretty well. Oftentimes that's just a lack of knowledge, right? You don't have a lot of at bats to run a fundraise. Like you don't know what you don't know. And so it's hard sometimes as a first-time founder, but when you see them, a first-time founder, it happens often more with second-time founders. But when you see a first-time founder running a good process, you're like, ooh, that's exciting, because they know what they're doing.
What's something you changed your mind about from the start of Fund 1 to where you are today?
That's a great question. I try to avoid the tropes of venture and like conventional wisdom. And I try to there's a lot of stuff we just, not just in venture, in life, that we just kind of go along with. Like, this is the way things are done. And so you're like, okay. I mean, like one of the things is like solo founders, right? And I look at our portfolio, we have a decent amount of solo founders. And then as a solo GP, right, I used to think that you need a partner. And now I realize you want a partner because it's more fun, because you're on this journey. Like, we're not guaranteed any success. I may make a ton of money 10 years from now. I may make nothing, right? Like, so you want a partner to enjoy the wins with. I don't actually know. I think in the best situations, partners help a lot, but it's not a guarantee. Like, so I looked at my last year, we did 16 investments in 2024. And then 2 more in the beginning of 2025. So like 16 investments. And then I was off for like 3.5 months for paternity leave. And then I was off for another month plus with school breaks for kids. And I'm like, it's 16 investments in like 8 months. Right. And that's 2 a month. You don't actually need, and sometimes it slows down decision making. and like you can move pretty fast without a partner. And it's like everyone would always say, you got to have a technical co-founder. You got to have this. You got to have that. I'm like, do you? And I think just like being an independent thinker around a lot of things, like, oh, I would never invest in a husband and wife team. I'm like, oh, my neighbors, they're a husband and wife team. They run $1 billion startup. Like they're doing okay.
If you had to force rank founder, product, market, what's that order look like for you?
I mean, founders first. And then honestly say, like, intellectually, I'd say market before product. Realistically, I'd probably do product before market. I think markets are hard. Like it has to be big enough. But I think we're bad at judging how big markets can be as investors. The best markets expand. The best markets, no one expected Uber to be beyond, silly taxi cabs. They were black cars at first. Like that's not a big market. And then they're like, no, we're Uber for everything in the world. And you're like, oh, okay, that's a big market. And so I think we get that wrong a lot. And products that feel like magic are great. Like, but I'll bet on a lot of companies pre-product too.
I want to go back to what you'd mentioned about velocity of deployment. How do you optimize for, you're writing a lot of checks? How do you think about building out a funnel and what that funnel looks like for you to get that right mix of you're seeing enough deals, get enough quality with doing the volume that you want to do, which is a fair bit.
Yeah. One thing I've learned as like a solo GP starting this fund, like, I mean, it's a ton of work, right? It's insane amount of work, but you can't be good at everything. You just can't be. And like, you have to pick a couple areas that you're going to be good at, and that you're going to put your energy towards. And then I let a lot of fires burn. So like, I focused on like, what are the things that make me different? What are my strengths? And like, I think every VC is smart. It's just like table stakes. I'm not trying to be the smartest. I'm probably in the dumber 50%, if I'm being honest. And that's not false humility. It's hard to get into this job if you haven't done something before. And so what am I good at? I'm occasionally kind of funny, and like most people are not funny. Like being smart is probably less rare than being funny. And so I'm like, okay, let's use funny to my advantage. And like I'll write these monthly updates. There's not a joke in every one because I've got 3 kids, and sometimes I'm just trying to get that thing out and don't have the energy at the end of the day to be funny. But like, if you can say something funny, people will open up your emails. And if you can get people, what I used to tell people at Techstars, when they were going through what was called mentor madness, they'd meet with 100 mentors, and they have 15 minutes to do that over 2 weeks, and they would try to pitch them everything that they need to know about their company. And I'm like, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Like, just get people to like you. Just get people to like you. And like, if they like you, they'll want to help you. And so like the jokes don't seem like anyone is a good strategy to be a VC. You're supposed to be like smart and brilliant genius. I know what the future looks like. And I'm like, I just try to get people to open up the monthly emails because that's where most of our deal flow comes from. And so I send it to my 180 LPs who are other VCs, who are operators, who are founders. I send it to another 500 friends in the startup community who are founders, operators, VCs. And like, that's where the deal flow comes from. And I focus on that. And then I focus on, trying to build a brand for the firm and like a personal brand on LinkedIn. Like those are like the 2 sources. It's like LinkedIn, building a brand that people can get behind, that's mission oriented, and that feels approachable. Like I'm not trying to be the smartest person on LinkedIn. Like I'm really just trying to be like, would I want to work with Ethan? And like that's the goal. If I come off as like, oh, I'd want to work with Ethan, like then I'm winning. Like if I come off as I know what the future looks like and super wonky and super smart, like I don't know. Do I want to work with that guy? Maybe not. I'm not really sure. But I just focus on 2 areas, and like that's where the deals come from.
I do read your emails. I get lots of emails from other VCs, but I enjoy reading them. They are fun.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
I'll go with one more question, and then I'll let you get back to solo GP life. But what's a question that you love to ask founders?
I love to ask founders. I ask a lot of founders, what is one thing that you've been top 1% in your life? And it doesn't have to be your career or academics. It could be something as esoteric as I was the #1 pine cone seller, in my Boy Scout troop in 3rd grade. And like, what's the one thing where you've excelled? And I invest in a lot of people, like when I talk about like origin stories, like like I'd say probably half our portfolio or a third of our portfolio went to some top Ivy League school. I don't know what that exact number is, but it's a lot of people, right? It's not like I don't invest in founders from top schools, but it's usually not that you got into some top school that's impressive to me, right? Like all that tells me is A, you're smart, B, your parents had enough money to give you an SA2 tutor. And like, yeah, being smart matters, but it's usually not the thing that is the driving force. It's not determinative of like building a good startup. It's usually like a thing. It's not the thing why people succeed. So like, I don't really care that you went to a good school. What I care about is like, oh, I went to Stanford, but what is the one thing you were top 1% at? Like, oh, I was in conservatory for piano. I was top 1% piano player. And what that tells me is like, you have the determination and drive to be excellent at something in your life. And I don't care how esoteric it is. Like piano's a pretty normal thing. Like sometimes it's weird stuff. People tell me weird stuff. And I'm like, that's effing awesome. That's really cool that you did this weird thing and you cared enough about this weird thing that you became, best in the world is an exaggeration, like best in your state or best in your county or best whatever, that you want to be the best at something. And I think if you are excellent at one thing, it probably transfers over to whatever you're going to do, that you have that drive to be great.
Awesome. Well, Ethan, this was fun. It's good having a nerdy chat with you. Hopefully I see you again soon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate that.
Hi, Joe again. Thanks for watching the show. If you'd like more of this in the future, subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to learn more about Seaplane Ventures, just check out seaplaneventures.com. Cheers.